The Financial Action Task Force was set up in 1889 in order to combat money laundering. Now, the components or the countries that subscribe to this task force are about 37 nations, including South Africa. And what's important to note about these 37 nations, they comprise of 90% of the world's GDP. So it's an influential group to be a part of. So the role of the Financial Action Task Force is to track and monitor the transfer of funds between the various countries with the goal to try and combat money laundering. So the task force sets off various parameters in which the member countries need to subscribe to. And one of the additional mandates of the Financial Action Task Force is to combat illicit funds and corruption. If this is not curtailed, it can lead to economic downfall of the various countries. An example of this is the lost decade in South Africa. Massive corruption had led to a period of almost a decade of no growth in South Africa. So after the Financial Action Task Force reviewed South Africa in 2019, it found major gaps in terms of corruption that did not comply to the various actions required by the Financial Action Task Force. Revelations from the CEO of Eskom. We've seen this week where there's massive bouts of corruption, openly known among the ruling party, yet nothing has been done. So when a country is found wanting in terms of their falling behind of the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force, they are put on a grey list and eventually they're put on a blacklist. There are a range of countries on the grey list and you need to keep up to the standards if you want to be removed of that grey list. The countries that were recently grey listed were South Africa and Nigeria. Pakistan at one point was grey listed and it was basically bouncing back and forth between being grey listed or not. Mauritius was also grey listed and one of the impacts that it had on their economy was that they lost about 1% of their GDP. One of the major problems we have in our country is the lax attitude that we have from regular citizens to people in leadership, the very lax attitude that we have towards corruption. It's like it's there and we must learn to live with it, but there's no action and no accountability when wrong is done with the funds of the South African public. One of our strengths of our nation is the strength of the financial services sector, like insurance and banking. And what it means is the cash inflows and outflows between us and the rest of the world now have to be more heavily scrutinized. We got to take excessive measures to ensure the origin of the funds. Where are they coming from? Are they proceeds from corruption? Are they proceeds from money laundering activities and other illegal activities? Is the money sent out being used for terrorism activities? So there's going to be excessive compliance that's required of the various financial agencies. So I want to read some research to you. I want to read it word for word so I don't miss anything. So a May 2021 paper from the International Monetary Fund. The title of the paper is The Impact of Grey Listing on Capital Flows, an Analysis Using Machine Learning. So this study suggests that the capital inflows can decline by an average of 7.6% of the GDP when a country is grey listed. The results also suggest that foreign direct investment inflows dip on an average by 3% of the GDP. Portfolio inflows decrease on average by 2.9% of the GDP, and other investment inflows fall by an average of 3.6% of the GDP. As a country that's so heavily dependent on foreign direct investment for our growth, we can expect this to have a negative impact in the medium to long term. While grey listing doesn't affect the average South African's day-to-day life, it does have impact on our environment and how we invest our money. If your business is doing a lot of cross-border transactions, there could be a lot more compliance requirements in terms of know your customer that needs to start being done. The bottom line on this grey listing is South Africa will lose some attractiveness in terms of a foreign investment destination. Okay, we're also battling Eskom. I mean, foreign countries would not want to come invest here anyway if we can't keep the lights on. And another risk is capital flows. The flow of foreign currency between us and the rest of the world. It could be reduced for the reasons I've just explained. And when we are sending money out in terms of investments instead of purchasing, a lot more compliance requirements are needed. And obviously that cost is going to be passed off to the customer. It also complicates the ease of doing business. It's not like we have an easy business environment. And I know for some reason it's the ease of business is measured here by terms of how easy it is to register the business. But if you look at the various requirements in terms of taxation, UIF, pay as you earn, employment equity, all of that complicates the ease of doing business. And especially when you're doing business with foreign currency, here's another complication on top of that. Cost of borrowing also increases as a country, because now, because of our risk, our rates for borrowing will go up. So only time will tell in the long term how much this will affect us. But for the bottom line, the average South African is not going to make much of a difference. But if you're somebody who's thinking of long-term planning, your retirement, your children, generational wealth, this is a huge blow.